There comes a quiet turning point in a woman's life when she realizes that her words have been working harder than the man who should have been hearing them. And it is in that moment, subtle, almost sacred, when something inside her shifts. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of a deeper understanding of herself. Because there is a boundary that does not need to be spoken to be felt. And it appears the moment she stops explaining what should have been understood long ago. Take a breath. Let the noise inside you settle. Because this part of your journey is not about raising your voice. It is about raising your presence. As Carl Jung said, silence is not merely the absence of sound, but the presence of meaning. And when a woman stops repeating herself, her silence becomes the clearest message she has ever sent. Perhaps you spent months, maybe years, trying to translate your heart into a language he never bothered to learn. You softened your tone, chose your words carefully, explained your needs gently, then urgently, then calmly again, hoping that this time he would finally understand. But explanations given too often lose their value. And a woman who explains herself endlessly becomes someone he listens to only halfway. Until you stop. It doesn't happen with a slammed door or a dramatic announcement. It happens in the smallest gesture, a pause, a breath, a decision not to elaborate. And suddenly he feels the shift. Something he took for granted is no longer guaranteed. Something he assumed would always be available, your emotional clarity, retreats just enough to wake him up. Men notice this silence. They notice when your sentences become shorter, when you no longer justify your feelings, when you stop filling the empty spaces he created with your patience. Your silence becomes a mirror, and like Jung said, the things that disturb us most are those that reflect our own shadows. In that reflection, he sees his neglect, his distance, his lack of effort. And for the first time, he is forced to confront it without your guidance. This is not withdrawal, it is awakening. You are not punishing him. You are returning to yourself. You are allowing your boundaries to speak where your explanations once exhausted you. And in that quiet strength, he begins to listen, not because you ask him to, but because your silence finally gives him the space to hear. There is a particular kind of silence that does not come from distance, but from clarity. A silence that rises inside you the moment you realize that no explanation, no matter how gentle, how patient, how sincere, can make someone see what they are not ready to acknowledge. And this silence, this new stillness within you, becomes the boundary he never expected but instantly feels. You see, when you stop explaining yourself, something remarkable happens. Your energy shifts. Your presence changes shape. You stop pouring your meaning into someone who is only half listening. And that absence of effort speaks louder than every word you ever offered. Suddenly, he is left alone with his own conscience, and it is far louder than your voice ever was. Jung believed that what you resist not only persists, it grows. And perhaps your explanations, your emotional labor, your constant attempts to make him understand, all of that kept him comfortable, because your words softened the truth he didn't want to see. But when the explanations stop, the truth stands naked. No buffer, no excuses, no softening. He feels it in the way you no longer rush to defend your feelings. He feels it in how you listen more than you respond. He feels it in the steadiness of your breath, in the way you hold your gaze without needing him to agree. Your silence reveals what your words once protected, that you were holding the emotional weight of the relationship alone. And men feel this weight shift deeply. It disrupts their rhythm. The dynamic changes. He can sense that you've stepped out of the role he took for granted, the role of interpreter, emotional caretaker, translator of your own needs. And what replaces it is a quiet power that demands respect without a single demand spoken aloud. This is the moment when he begins to actually hear you. Not because you insist, but because the silence forces him to confront what he has avoided. Without your explanations, he must finally meet your feelings with his own effort. Your silence creates a space where he must either rise or retreat. And the beauty is this: You are no longer explaining yourself to be understood. You are allowing him to reveal who he truly is. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when your silence stops being an absence and becomes an echo. A presence so steady, so undeniable, that it forces him to look at what he has overlooked for far too long. And this is when everything inside the dynamic begins to shift. You see, a man grows accustomed to the sound of a woman's explanations. He gets used to her filling in the blanks, smoothing out misunderstandings, softening every conflict with clarity. Your explanations became a bridge he walked across without ever noticing who built it. But now that you've stepped back, he feels the emptiness underneath his feet. The bridge is no longer reinforced by your effort, and he must confront the truth. He was walking on ground you maintained alone. As Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Your silence is exactly that, the unveiling of what was unconscious. A gentle but firm confrontation with reality. He can no longer pretend not to know what you feel. He can no longer dismiss his own patterns. Without your explanations shielding him, he is finally exposed to himself. He starts replaying your past conversations. He remembers the things you tried to tell him, the signals he ignored, the softness he took advantage of. He begins to notice the small details, the ones he missed because he assumed you would always be there to articulate what he didn't grasp. Your silence turns into a new language, one he cannot translate without effort. And effort is exactly what he must now bring. Something else happens, too. Something subtle, something ancient in human connection. When you stop explaining, you reclaim your emotional gravity. He feels it immediately. The dynamic is no longer centered around his comfort. It becomes balanced. He senses that your energy has withdrawn not out of spite, but out of truth. And truth has weight. He begins to listen differently, attentively, cautiously, almost reverently. Because your silence is no longer a gap, it is a boundary. A boundary that tells him, if you want to stay, you must meet me where I am, not where it is easy for you. And suddenly, he realizes that the woman who once explained everything now leaves space for him to finally understand. There is a mysterious moment in every woman's inner evolution when her silence no longer feels like withdrawal. It feels like presence, a deeper grounding, a subtle reclaiming of herself. And men feel this shift with extraordinary intensity, even if they don't fully understand it. Because the energy they once relied on, the softness they expected, the explanations they grew comfortable with, all of it changes its direction. It no longer flows toward them automatically. It settles back into you. This is where he begins to feel what words could never make him understand. Your absence becomes louder than your explanations ever were. He notices the difference in your tone, calmer, steadier. He notices the way you answer, clearly, without justification. He notices the way you no longer chase clarity, but wait for him to offer it. And this unsettles him, not because you've become distant, but because you've become self-contained. You no longer need his validation to confirm what you feel. You no longer stretch yourself emotionally to reach him. You stand where you are, firmly, gracefully, and allow him to decide whether he will step forward. As Carl Jung said, what you withdraw your energy from loses its power. And this is exactly what happens. When you stop explaining yourself, you withdraw energy from the dynamic where his comfort mattered more than your truth. Suddenly, he realizes that he no longer has access to the emotional certainty he once took for granted. He must earn it now. He must show up, not just react. This is when he begins to ask questions instead of giving excuses. This is when he starts listening instead of waiting for his turn to speak. This is when he begins to reflect on his role instead of defending it. Your silence doesn't create distance, it creates accountability. It forces him to meet his own reflection without your guidance softening the edges. And here lies the beauty. You are no longer trying to fix the dynamic. You are allowing it to reveal itself. If he steps forward, it will be because he chooses to, not because your explanations pulled him. If he doesn't, it will be because he wasn't capable, and your silence protected you from wasting more of your spirit on what was never ready. In this space, he finally begins to understand what your words tried to teach him all along. That your heart is a privilege, not a guarantee. There is a moment, subtle, nearly imperceptible, when a man suddenly becomes aware of everything he never noticed before. It's not triggered by your words, not by an argument, not by an ultimatum. It is triggered by the absence of something he thought would always be there, your explanations. The moment you stop justifying your feelings, he begins to feel the gravity of them. Your silence becomes a quiet revelation. He notices that you no longer rush to soften your truth. He notices that you no longer fill the pauses with reassurance. He notices that when he asks, "What's wrong?" you no longer answer with a dissertation. You answer with honesty, simplicity, or sometimes nothing at all. And that nothing speaks loudly. It forces him to confront the reality he avoided. He begins to observe you with a new kind of attentiveness, not because you demanded it, but because your silence made space for him to step into responsibility. As Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. But when you stop explaining, you remove the distractions. He must finally face himself. This is when he realizes the weight you carried, the emotional calculations you made, the bridges you built between your heart and his. And he sees, maybe for the first time, that your explanations weren't a burden. They were a gift he rarely reciprocated. Now the dynamic shifts. He finds himself replaying your tone, your gestures, your pauses. He starts watching your expressions carefully, searching for meaning he once ignored. He begins to ask himself why he didn't listen sooner. Your silence becomes a mirror. Not cold, not punitive, just honest. A mirror he cannot look away from. And here lies the paradox. By speaking less, you teach him more. By withdrawing explanation, you reveal truth. By stepping back, you give him room to step forward, if he is capable. Some men feel this shift as a gentle awakening. Others feel it as a shock they don't know how to process. But all of them feel it. Because when a woman stops explaining herself, she stops cushioning reality. And reality, in its unsoftened form, has a way of echoing in a man's conscience. This is the moment when he must choose. To grow or to retreat. To listen or to repeat old patterns. To meet you at your depth or lose access to it. There is a moment a man never forgets. The moment he feels the shift in your presence. Not because you left, not because you argued, not because you made a scene, but because something in you quietly stopped carrying what was never yours to hold. And he feels this change like a sudden stillness in the air, like the absence of a sound he once relied on without noticing. You see, he was accustomed to your emotional labor, to your explanations that made his misunderstandings easier to bear, to your patience smoothing out the rough edges of every conflict, to your ability to articulate not only your feelings, but sometimes his as well. But now the emotional load has returned to its rightful owner, and for the first time, he feels its weight. Your silence isn't cold. It isn't punishing. It isn't even distant. It is simply accurate. It reflects the reality he created by not listening when your words still flowed. As Carl Jung said, you meet your destiny on the road you take to avoid it. His destiny, now, is facing the emotional truth you once tried to shield him from. The destiny of accountability. The destiny of listening. The destiny of showing up, or losing what he thought would always be there. He begins to notice things he never paid attention to before. The steadiness in your voice, the clarity in your sentences, the absence of self-defense, and it unnerves him. Because for the first time, he realizes that you are no longer trying to convince him of your worth or of your pain. You are simply living your truth. Quietly, fully, authentically. This is the point where many men, often for the first time, hear the echo of their own neglect. He hears the questions you no longer ask. He hears the explanations you no longer give. He hears the softness that no longer rushes to comfort his ego. Your silence becomes his teacher, not through blame, but through contrast, not through pressure, but through presence. And in that contrast, he recognizes a truth that shakes him. The relationship was never balanced. Your voice carried what his actions never matched. Now, he must decide who he will become in the face of a woman who finally stands in her own emotional truth. Will he rise to meet you? Or will he fall away from a standard he never expected to face? Your silence reveals the answer, not by demanding change, but by no longer sacrificing yourself for it. There comes a moment in a woman's journey when silence stops being a reaction and becomes a decision. Not a withdrawal, not a punishment, a declaration of inner truth. And men feel this with a kind of instinctive sensitivity they rarely admit. Because when a woman who once explained every nuance of her heart suddenly stops, it creates a shift in the atmosphere that he cannot ignore. Your silence becomes a boundary he never saw coming. He senses it in the way you pause before answering, in the way your eyes no longer search his for understanding, in the way your words are no longer wrapped in softness, but in clarity. This subtle shift demands something he's not used to offering: presence. The presence he kept postponing. The presence he thought he could replace with promises or charm. But now, neither promises nor charm reach you. Not because you hardened, but because you awakened. As Carl Jung wrote, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Your silence is precisely that acceptance. You are no longer trying to convince him, fix him, or guide him into understanding. You are simply holding your truth, fully and quietly. It is this acceptance of yourself, unfiltered, unapologetic, that forces him to finally see the parts of you he overlooked. He begins to realize that the woman who once stretched herself emotionally to make the relationship work is now standing still, whole, centered. And that stillness reveals everything. How little he carried, how much you explained, how often he relied on your emotional clarity so he could remain emotionally comfortable. Now the comfort is gone. Your silence becomes a mirror, and he sees himself without your explanations softening the view. He sees the unfinished efforts, the half-presence, the moments you begged with your tone instead of your words. He sees how he mistook your patience for endlessness. And something shifts inside him, not because you demanded change, but because your silence revealed the cost of his inaction. This is where real awakening begins. He realizes he cannot coast on your emotional labor anymore. He realizes that, to stay close to you, he must become intentional. He realizes that listening is not passive, it is a form of love. Your silence becomes the doorway he must choose to walk through. And if he hesitates, if he resists, if he avoids, the door remains closed, not out of punishment, but out of truth. Because you have finally understood something profound. A woman who carries herself with silent clarity cannot be loved halfway. There comes a moment when a woman's silence stops merely echoing. It begins to transform the dynamic entirely. Because true silence is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is a boundary wrapped in calmness, a truth carried without urgency. And when you finally hold that kind of silence, he feels something he never felt before. The difference between hearing you and understanding you. You see, when you explained yourself endlessly, he heard the words but missed the meaning. Your explanations cushioned his ego, softened reality, made everything feel less urgent. But now, without those explanations, the truth stands in its pure form, unsoftened, unnegotiated, unmistakable. And for the first time, he sees what you were really asking for all along. He sees the vulnerability behind your past words. He sees the effort behind your patience. He sees the sincerity behind the emotions he once dismissed. Your silence exposes the emotional architecture of the relationship, what he contributed and what he didn't. As Carl Jung said, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Your silence forces his consciousness to awaken. Suddenly, he feels everything you used to explain. He feels your fatigue. He feels your distance. He feels the cost of his own inattentiveness. Now he is no longer responding to your words. He is responding to your energy. He begins to sit with himself in ways he avoided before. He replays the conversations you carried. He hears the tone behind your quiet. He senses the strength in your restraint. This is the moment when he realizes something profound. Your silence is not the absence of communication. It is the arrival of truth. He feels compelled to lean in, to ask instead of assume, to listen instead of react, to notice what he once ignored. Your silence restructures the emotional landscape. It no longer revolves around his comfort. It revolves around your clarity. And this is where many men take their first real step toward emotional maturity. Not because you asked them to change, but because, for the first time, they truly see what they stand to lose if they don't. Because a woman who no longer explains herself is a woman who has stepped into her self-respect. And a man who recognizes this begins to understand that love requires more than presence. It requires awareness. There is a moment, profound, unmistakable, when a man realizes that your silence is not a pause, but a turning point. It is the moment when he feels your absence more deeply than he ever felt your presence. Because your presence was familiar, constant, forgiving. But your silence is a truth he can no longer outrun. When you stop explaining yourself, something inside him awakens. Not suddenly, but gradually, like a dawn he didn't expect. He begins to sense the distance you once tried to prevent. He notices the quiet where your warmth used to be. And this quiet is not cold, it is reflective. It forces him inward, toward thoughts he never wanted to face. He begins to understand that the explanations you offered were not demands, they were invitations. Invitations to meet you, to see you, to understand you. Invitations he ignored because he assumed there would always be more time, more chances, more softness waiting for him. But now time feels different. Chances feel fewer. Softness is no longer guaranteed. As Carl Jung wrote, until you confront the unconscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it destiny. Your silence confronts the unconscious patterns he never questioned. The laziness in his listening, the comfort in your clarity, the assumption that your love required no effort. Now he feels the weight of every moment he didn't show up. He feels the heaviness of every conversation you carried alone. He feels the echo of the words you no longer speak. And this echo becomes a lesson. He starts paying attention, not to fix, but to understand. He notices the subtle changes in your expressions. He feels the steadiness in your boundaries. He realizes that you are no longer trying to convince him of anything, not even of your worth. Because you don't need to. Your silence speaks it with a strength he cannot ignore. This is the moment he truly begins to listen, not because you ask, but because he fears what your quiet really means. That you are not waiting anymore. That you are no longer emotionally accessible on command. That you have stepped into a place he cannot enter without effort, maturity, and genuine intention. Your silence becomes the threshold he must choose to cross, or lose access to the woman he never knew how to appreciate until now. There is a final moment in every woman's awakening, a moment so quiet, so inward, that it marks the true turning point of her emotional life. It is the moment when you stop needing him to understand, when you stop waiting for the listening that never came, when your silence no longer hopes to be interpreted, but simply exists as the truth of who you have become. And he feels this with a depth that shakes him. Your silence is no longer an invitation for him to try harder. It is the closure of a chapter where you once carried the weight of the story alone. It is the reclaiming of your inner world, the world he only visited, but never learned to honor. He senses the difference instantly, not because you leave, but because you return to yourself. Your gaze becomes steadier, your steps more grounded, your heart quieter, but fuller. You no longer explain your boundaries, you embody them. You no longer justify your feelings, you inhabit them. You no longer ask to be understood, you choose to be aligned with your truth. As Carl Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that is exactly what this silence has given you, a return to your own center. He now understands something he never understood before. Your explanations were not demands. Your patience was not unconditional. Your softness was not infinite. He realizes that losing your explanations means losing the emotional access he once considered guaranteed. And for the first time, he sees the real consequence of not listening when your heart still spoke. This is when he becomes a different man or disappears entirely, because your final silence forces a choice. He must grow into someone capable of meeting you with awareness, effort, and presence. Or he must step aside, because the woman you have become no longer bends for half-formed love. Your silence transforms him, not into who you wanted, but into who he must choose to become. And it transforms you even more deeply. You step into a new emotional landscape where your boundaries breathe for you, where your truth doesn't require translation, where your worth is a fact rather than a negotiation. You finally understand that a woman who stops explaining herself is a woman who has remembered her power, a woman who has returned home to her soul, a woman who no longer seeks to be heard because she has learned to listen to herself. And that is the moment he truly begins to listen.